we've looked at how the foundation models are being trained, and we've also looked at how that foundation LLM models being utilized within the copilot for security environment, the data flow that happens from the time the user prompts until the user receives a response. But there's one more important point that I need to elaborate a little bit before we move on to the demonstration of the copilot for security. That is plugins. Plugins play an important role in solving one of the most important problem in this context that the foundation model has. For example, let's take you asked the question from ChatGPT about who is the Prime Minister of the UK. It is going to provide you an answer based on the latest trained date, which is 2022, and it's going to be the previous Prime Minister. It is because there is a limitation. It cannot provide you information beyond what it has been trained, or at least it's limited to the time it's been trained. So in this instance, if you want to get the up-to-date information, you need to provide that information in some way to the LLM. So that could be like a news article or a news article repository where you can provide that. So when the LLM receives that query, the prompt, it can send it to, it can do that grounding. It can send that information to make sure whether that information it has already is correct or does it needs amending. And then it'll receive that information from the news article source and then feedback to provide the response to the user. So this is similarly, this is what's happening in the plugins on the Copilot for Security. So the Copilot for Security, imagine, let's say there is an incident and that incident's been raised on Sentinel, and you want to get more information about this incident, and you are prompting to Copilot for Security. Copilot for Security will then send that to the plugin to get more information about this information, the incident, and then respond back to you on that incident, because it will now have more relevant information about that incident, because the LLM is being trained on previous data. But this is what you're asking now is most up-to-date data information that you need, and that the LLM itself cannot provide that. That's why your plugins come into play and solve that problem. Right, let's move on to the Copilot for Security window. So you got the familiar dashboard where you have the ChatGPT-like experience, where you got the prompt box is here. Within the prompt, on the right hand side of the prompt box, you have the prompts, and you've also got the sources. So if you click on the sources, this is where you see plugins. You got plugins, and you also got files where you can upload your own files. Plugins are categorized into two categories. One is Microsoft provided plugins, which are Microsoft developed plugins, and non-Microsoft plugins. You can also see more non-Microsoft plugins here. And enabling and disabling the plugin is simply done by these toggle switches. But what you're saying is, when you enable this, you are allowing Copilot for Security to go and get up-to-date information from that particular plugin. And you also see some plugins has a setup, or some plugins have you can see a setup. Yeah, exactly. It used to be a gear icon where you had to configure. Some of these are automatic, so these Microsoft plugins, basically you just need to click on toggle and it'll automatically connect to that source. But where it says a setup is required, even in the content plugin, let's say Sentinel. There you go. So if you click on Sentinel, you need to provide the log analytics workspace, the subscription name, and the resource group name. You need to provide those information. So you've also got the I'll just highlight about this external plugins. So these plugins will also need similarly, they also need setup. Most of these plugins will need setting up through an API key or some other form, where you have to link both. Then the Copilot for Security can utilize that information. If, for example, there's a URL scan plugin or Shodan, you can click on this, and then it'll, if it's an IP address, you can always check if it's available publicly, accessible publicly, whatever the information that you can get from Shodan Internet. Shodan can be fed into the Copilot for Security to enhance your response, enrich your response.